Greetings and salutations, fellow book readers. This is Mark, and the book I will review today is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Before we continue, this is personalized limited edition of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas with leather cover designed and made by me. At the end of the video, I will tell you a couple of ways of how you can get one for yourself if you are interested. Now let's get back to the review. I thought there is no more appropriate place to do it than Las Vegas Boulevard, here in Las Vegas, where I am visiting my mother. Thompson said that 5 days here will age you 5 years, and I am here for 20 days, so I can only imagine the damage I will suffer. Time seems to pass here faster, and after a week, it feels as I have been here much longer. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, a savage journey to the heart of the American dream, is a 1971 fictionalized autobiographical novel by an eccentric American journalist and author, Hunter S. Thompson. Thompson was famous for his gonzo-style journalism, which I think was coined by Thompson, and it basically means reporting a story with a lot of fiction and exaggerations added and making yourself the star of it. Looking around, we could say that nowadays we are living in the age defined by gonzo journalism. There are people who consider Hunter S. Thompson to be the best American writer, but I have some reservations. It might be his subjects, American sports and the politics, which don't interest me much. Anyway, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is Thompson's best-known work, and even consider his best work, but again I preferred The Curse of Lono, which I found more interesting and mature, maybe because he was older and had a bit more serious view of the world. Hunter S. Thompson was a keen observer, interpreter, and chronicler of his times, in his own original style, similar to William Boroughs or Charles Bukowski or Henry Miller. This line from the book gives a pretty accurate description of how he saw himself. There he goes, one of God's own prototypes, a high-powered mutant of some kind, never even considered for mass production, too weird to live and too rare to die. But for me, Thompson was a lot more of a contradiction than the before-mentioned writers. He was a paradox, an observer, and at the same time a willing participant. For example, he considered Clinton to be a bigger liar than Nixon, who he despised, but voted for him in the 1992 election because he didn't want George Bush to win. He was also an avid, almost fanatical firearm user, but said, "America is a country of 220 million used car salesmen, able to buy guns and having no qualms about killing anybody." Further, I see Thompson as a bit of modern-day Henry David Thoreau, disappointed with the American society and trying to prove how bad it is. One wonders what would Thompson become if he won the election for the sheriff's post in Colorado, where he was a candidate. Would being on the inside of the system change him? After the loss, he became more disillusioned and even bitter about the politics and the American society in general. In a closed society where everybody is guilty, the only crime is getting caught. In a world of thieves, the only final sin is stupidity. And this personal defeat seems to have led to the beginning of his famous gonzo-style journalism, a couple of trips to Las Vegas, and subsequent publication of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. What is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas about? On the surface, it is a work weekend of a couple of heavy drug users in Las Vegas, but thanks to the drugs, the trip becomes a satirical view into the decline of the American society and its dreams. Also a portrait of the late 60s and early 70s America, somewhat confused and lost, paranoid and self-destructive, and most of it blamed on the Vietnam War and Nixon. A bit of the plot. The plot is a weekend in Las Vegas where two individuals, Raoul Duke, supposedly Thompson's alter ego, and his attorney and friend, Dr. Gonzo, based on Thompson's attorney and friend, Oscar Zeta Acosta, who was a Mexican-American activist. Acosta disappeared a few years after the memorable trip with Thompson in a Mexican state of Sinaloa. Sinaloa today is famous for its drug cartel, previously commanded by the infamous El Chapo. Maybe Acosta got himself involved in a drug deal that went sour and got himself dropped into the Sea of Cortez with a pair of concrete boots. In the book, Acosta is portrayed as a Samoan and not Mexican, which he resented. The story begins with Duke and Dr. Gonzo arriving in Las Vegas, contracted by a magazine to do a story on a motorcycle race. But the assignment becomes secondary to the experimenting with a variety of drugs, which caused the two bizarre hallucinations and rather strange behaviors, such as extensive property destruction, an attempted suicide, and a murder, also attempted. But there are some sane moments of reflection on the state of the American society. But our trip was different. It was a classic affirmation of everything right and true and decent in the national character. It was a gross physical salute to the fantastic possibilities of life in this country, but only for those with true grit, and we were chock full of that. The statement is probably an irony, but it reflects a very basic truth about America. The grit is what made it into the country that Thompson sees and describes. What are my thoughts on Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas? This is one of these books that needs to be deeply penetrated under the surface and not to be taken literally. Otherwise, it will be superficial and immature. There are gems of lucid and keen reflections and observations, but they float in the sea of seemingly irrelevant and unimportant events. I think the prose probably is supposed to reflect the vagueness, contradictions, and general utopia of the American dream. The subtitle, A Savage Journey to the Heart of the American Dream, refers to the idea of Las Vegas as the new symbol of the American dream, full of physical stimulus to keep us psychologically isolated and from seeing and thinking what is going on around us. Thompson says, circus is what the whole world would be doing on Saturday night if the Nazis won the war. I find the structural design of the casino to be pretty conducive to the general ideas implied in the book. A large self-contained building and somewhat protected from the outside world, with food and sleeping quarters available, no windows so we don't see the passage of time and are not reminded of the life outside the casino, and the constant noise of money falling down as from the sky, to give us false hope of the American dream, seemingly accessible to everybody, and also to keep us in the present and from thinking about the latter consequences of our actions, and how bad we are getting screwed by the people on the top. It reminds me of a few lines from Bukowski's poem, The Crunch. Our educational system tells us that we can all be biggest winners. It hasn't told us about the gathers or the suicides. For me, the American dream is a bit like the American exceptionalism, an illusion to keep the masses artificially happy and, more importantly, hopeful, so they can increasingly consume. I know there are examples of some poor bugger washing out on the America's shores and through hard work and ingenuity achieving his American dream, but the immigrants, because of their background, are willing to do more and make sacrifices that your average American will not. And also, you don't have to be in America to achieve your American dream. Not anymore. I think George Carlin said, to believe in the American dream, you have to be sleeping. Thompson's famous words, buy the ticket, take the ride, might be used in the reference to the American dream as well. Sadly, the ticket is becoming too expensive for the most, But on the other hand, the American dream seems to be resilient, like a cat with his 9 lives, maybe because it is an illusion. It dies every few decades and then it is resurrected in some altered form and sold to the masses by the snake oil salesmen, politicians, and the wealthy, so they can keep themselves in power. Unfortunately, every subsequent form of the American dream is the watered-down version of the previous one. It is kind of like stock or Bitcoin. It splits until it reaches its limit, and then what? I am old enough to remember the previous business mantra, under-promise and over-deliver, and now it is over-promise, oversell, and under-deliver, or not deliver at all. Kind of like Las Vegas. Further, Thompson says that when in Las Vegas you do crime, you have to do it big, because everybody is too preoccupied with little infractions to notice it. This is probably a metaphor for America in general, over-disciplining the little criminal and impunity for the big one. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is autobiographical, and its significance lies in Thompson's view of America and how he dealt with it. Every now and then, when your life gets complicated and the weasels start closing in, the only cure is to load up on heinous chemicals and then drive like a bastard from Hollywood to Las Vegas, with the music at the top volume and at least a pint of ether. Or the suicides. Every now and then, when your life gets complicated and the weasels start closing in, the only cure is to load up on heinous chemicals and start closing in. The only cure is to load up on heinous chemicals and then drive like a bastard from Hollywood to Las Vegas, with music at the top volume and at least a pint of ether. Unfortunately, this self-applied recipe had a tragic impact on Thompson's professional and personal life. It was visibly down the hill from the 70s, and his life became stagnant at some point. If you watch any later interviews with him, it was even difficult to understand him. But in the book, he goes further and gives very specific advice on how to behave, which is somewhat effective and practical. 1. Never trust a cop in a raincoat. 2. Be aware of enthusiasm and of love. Both are temporary and quick to sway. 3. If asked if you care about the world's problems, look deep into the eyes of the who asks. He will never ask you again. 4. Never give your real name. 5. If ever asked to look at yourself, don't look. 6. Never do anything that person standing in front of you can't understand. 7. Never create anything. It will be misinterpreted. It will chain you and follow you for the rest of your life. For me, the book is very American, maybe because Thompson was very American, somewhat of an American icon, focused on American politics and American sports. Thus, me, a foreigner, might not fully appreciate its cult or even religious-like significance to many Americans, and their somewhat obsessive-like following of the writer. I am more objective and see it as another piece of literature, and Thompson as a product of the American culture, somewhat of a rebel without a cause. And I wonder how much of his personality was spontaneous and how much of it was a deliberate act. To sum it up, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is a satirical commentary on the state of the American society post-World War II, when probably it was going through its most profound social changes. Today we seem to be going through the second phase of it, simultaneously dealing with revolution and counter-revolution, and also its consequences. And one has to wonder what would Thompson's literary reaction and general opinions be. He was pretty liberal, but I wonder if he would be more critical of Trump or Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden's political corruption. Also, what he would make out of the legal and government-approved drugging of the American society by the pharmaceutical industry, and what would he say about the state of journalists and news media today? He was already pretty skeptical about it during his times. The press is a gang of cruel faggots. Journalism is not a profession or a trade. It is a cheap catch-all for fuck-offs and misfits, a false doorway to the backside of life, a filthy piss-ridden little hole nailed off by the building inspector, but just deep enough for a wino to curl up from the sidewalk and masturbate like a chimp in a zoo cage. I wonder if there is a modern-day Hunter S. Thompson we have not recognized yet. There seemingly are plenty of gonzo journalists around, but they seem to lack the depth of perception. Also, reading Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas today, it doesn't feel as shocking as when it was published. Maybe because we arrive in a place where nothing astounds and disgusts us, it is even expected. And this begs the question, is the book as or more relevant today than when it was published? I don't know, it seems we live in the times when everything is relevant and at the same time irrelevant, so it is chef's choice. I assume in the recent history, most people were motivated to read the book after seeing the film with Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro. I thought it gave pretty good visuals to go with the text, probably because Thompson himself was very involved in its production and he was a perfectionist. And probably it was one of the few rare times when the adaptation is as good as the book. Okay, let's talk about the physical book. The book I am holding is a paperback which I transformed into a hardcover leather-bound edition. To make the cover, I use grade A, naturally tan hide I buy from tanner in North Spain. It is the same leather Louis Vuitton uses to make his bags, so it is top quality. I do all the processing of the leather myself. First, I designed the cover, and I found this nice poster with sunglasses, pistol, and a typing machine set against the Southwest desert background, and I thought it nicely reflected the spirit of the book. This is the bag with the blurb and the Las Vegas sign pattern as the background, and inside the front cover I printed a quote from the book. If you want to see a more detailed video where I explain how I transform paperback into leather hardcover, click on the link in the description. I will make a maximum of 100 editions of each title. Each one will be numbered and initialed, and the numbers will go in chronological order from 2 up, since number 1 stays with me. The price will be around $100, so if you would like me to make one for you, you can click below on my email and send me a message. I do not guarantee I will do it, since it will depend on the time I have available, access to leather, and if I can get my hands on the copy of the book. Now, if you're not willing to spend the $100 but you still want the book, what you can do is click below on the PayPal link and donate $3 or more to my channel, and for every 100 donations, I'll make a lottery and draw one name, and the winner will receive the book. So, if you are cheap but feel lucky, this might be the way to do it. Also, your donations give me the extra motivation to make the book reviews, and I appreciate them very much. So thank you in advance. One more thing, when you make your donation, remember to include the title of the book you would like to win. The book itself is beautiful. Visually, it has a very nice texture, it smells great, and the more you handle it, the more beautiful it will become. And it makes a great gift for yourself or somebody who appreciates books. So if you own one, don't snooze, or you might lose. Well, that's it. So let's end it here, and until next time, keep your ear close to the ground and read a book. Adios.